about TOK. So we just finished our last semester, and then you guys are going to take it next year. And so if you're like doing the IB diploma, you're going to be like required to take it. But if you're not, like, you're still free to take the class, and I would advise to take the class because it's really fun. So we're just going to talk about like things that we do in class.
Yeah, and so before we get started, does anyone know what TOK stands for?
Theory of knowledge.
Theory of knowledge, yeah. So basically what theory of knowledge is, and we'll show you more about what it is it's literally a theory about knowledge and how we gain knowledge, how we learn, like stuff like that. So yeah, I'm going to hand it off to Sam and Adam for the first little section.
Okay.
Oh, here, we'll split up
Okay.
so you guys can
Alright,
see.
so it's your question. No, it's you. It's your point. No, I'm the next part.
No, remember yesterday? No, yesterday morning. When we were working on it?
Title.
Yeah.
No, I'm doing the next part.
No, I remember we were at Caribou yesterday morning. We were working on the presentation. And I said you were going to do this.
a problem.
So you watched the Super Bowl instead.
No, because I'm better at the next part.
No, we agreed that I was doing the second part.
No, because I'm doing the part about it's a big fight just to prove our point.
Okay,
So this is,
so now we're actually going to, we'll use this later, just so you know. Just keep this in mind. So first off, on a piece of paper or something, define the word truth. Your own words.
Any piece of paper is fine. Any piece of scratch paper is fine, folks.
Oh, wow.
About 30 seconds.
Speak.
I think it was.
I'll give you a little bit more time because it's a hard word to find. Does anyone have a definition that they want to share?
Fact.
Sorry?
Fact.
Fact?
Something that's factually based.
How do you determine if something's factually based? Which one of their arguments out of the two of them was factually based?
Something you can prove. How can you prove it?
How can you prove which one of them was right? You weren't there. There's no video evidence of their conversation about who was supposed to do the two slides. Whose truth was the real truth?
Can't really figure out from that.
So is there a truth?
There is, but you can't learn it from just third-hand experience.
So for things that we aren't there for or things that we don't experience ourselves and we have no other way to do it, is there any way that we can ever actually learn the truth? There are valid arguments on both sides too,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure,
so
yeah.
Don't be worried to like say anything because like
There's
there's
really not an
actually
answer.
no answer.
Literally no answer.
That's what TOK is all about.
Yeah. Like you can't be wrong in that class.
There are 4 major theories of what truth is, and in class we kind of like cycle through like different ones a lot, so, and different truths are credible for different arguments.
Or yeah, you could take on, you know, the devil's advocate and you say, okay, I don't think that this is the definition of truth, but if I did, here's what I would say. And, you know, it gets into some cool little discussions and debates, but, you know, across. Yeah, so yeah. So answer these with a yes or no in your head. So do you believe that the sun will rise tomorrow? Do you believe that no person can ever draw a square circle? Smoking causes lung cancer? Can science give us the only true answer to the world? And that no one can be true logical. So just like write down, or know your answers for each one for sure. So how do you, which ones of those, if we go back, which ones of these do you guys know are true?
Should we,
Yeah, raise your hand.
I'd say first one, second one, fourth, and maybe fifth.
Okay.
No, I disagree with that.
Why do you
Think.
disagree?
Because, like, I don't know. The last one is an opinionated statement. And I don't get how you think the third one isn't fact, or like isn't true.
It doesn't necessarily have to.
That's true, but it can.
It can.
Yeah, but it
And
doesn't have
the
to.
first one, we don't know for sure.
but why?
But everything can like explode, it could be a black hole or something.
You know, that's like so true about like one of the theories of truth is that it's cohesion, or no, sorry, correspondence, where it's this, something is considered true because it's lined up with things that have happened in the past. And so that's how like that's how a lot of historical analysis runs. So like if you see like falling economic standards, it's likely that there's going to be truth in the statement that there's going to be a rise in nationalism. And so like that's kind of like the same thing of like we do, through the correspondence theory of truth, we know that the sun will rise tomorrow. But besides that, we don't. But if we don't use that theory of truth, then we don't exactly, yeah.
Right, like if I throw a ball across the room right now or I try to drop something, what do you think is going to happen?
It's gonna fall.
It's going to fall. How do you know that it's going to fall?
Because
Gravity.
fallen before.
Because gravity?
Yeah.
Because it's fallen before, right? Because we've tried time and time and time and time and time again with gravity, and it's worked every single time, right? So does anyone... Okay. Does anyone else have anything else to say about this, or which of these they believe to be the truth, or how? The next thing we're going to be looking at is, okay, so you mentioned that, we don't know about the sun tomorrow, or that smoking causes lung cancer, or that. Okay, the one that we should actually look at is no one can be too logical. Who in here believes that it is the truth that you can be too logical? Raise your hand. Raise your hand.
All
That
hands.
it's possible to be too logical.
Is someone confused about what,
Yes, I am.
how you can be too logical?
Well, that's kind of inherent in the question. It's you use reason and only reason.
All the time.
You use reason and only reason to determine your choices.
No emotion.
Because there are a lot of different ways that you can make decisions, a lot of different things you can use to know, right? But if you use reason and only reason,
Is reason the only way of knowing?
yeah.
Or the most valid way of knowing.
So just big hand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we want you to answer the question. No one can be too logical. Raise your hand if you think no one can be too logical. That's true.
Okay, so we all apparently agree that logical is the ideal state, and everyone should be as humanly logical as possible, right? There should be no room for anything but logic.
Wait, I thought it was the opposite.
No, it's,
I thought it was the opposite.
Yeah.
When it-
Yeah.
that
My bad.
you can be too logical?
Yeah. Okay. Happy days.
So
Next one.
moving on.
okay, so
Wait,
now we're going to start looking at
This one?
yeah. We talked about which ones we know to be true. How do we know that those things are true?
What goes into like making those decisions?
We talked about logic. What are some of the other?
Say with the example of dropping a ball onto the floor, you know it is true because that's how gravity works.
But how do you know that's how gravity works?
Logic, right? Because that's the first thing you thought of, right? You said, okay, the ball's going to drop. I've seen this happen before. Therefore, it's going to happen again, right? So therefore, that's logic, right? What are some of the other ways that I could know something?
Reasoning.
Reason? Okay, logic and reason are pretty close, I would say, right? They go hand in hand. What about faith?
That's a pretty good one.
Or emotion. Can you know something because of emotion?
What about a bias?
It's
And
all
will
knowledge.
that bias be formed because of reason or logic?
What about just like knowing it? Like you're like, that's true, but you can't explain it.
Or like someone. That's. Any thoughts on that? So is faith a valid way of knowing? If we go back to the statement like, science is the only, can give us the only answer to the universe. There are people who disagree with that very strongly. And is it less valid that their way of knowing less valid? No.
Again, there are no wrong answers.
Right, there's absolutely no wrong answers. That's part of the hard part of TOK is getting comfortable enough with everyone around you to be able to express your opinions, because it often touches subjects that are maybe a little bit
Really touchy.
you've never had to talk about before, like where you stand on religion versus science, or stuff like that, and stuff that maybe hasn't come up in your classes, but it's actually a really cool and fun experience. Yeah, and you get to know your classmates a lot better, I would say. So.
Yeah, really
Any more ideas on ways of knowing?
Well, or if we think back to the fight, Sam was appealing to the side that he was very reasonable. He said, I am good at the next part of this. You were the one who's supposed to take this. We set up a plan, right? And Adam was appealing to the side of, dude, I was really busy. Like, I had a bunch of stuff going on, and you knew that. And so you could argue that Adam's way of truth was a lot more emotionally charged, right?
So how do you determine the validity between emotion and reason?
Like, is one way of knowing better than another?
Depends on what you're arguing for.
In this example.
What can be proven?
Exactly what you saw. This is all the
How do you
information
know
we
what's
have.
true if you can't see the proof?
You don't.
So then how do you know history? That's the next question is, I wasn't there when, give me a historical event that I was not alive for. I was alive for 9/11.
Okay, you were
I was
there.
not, I was
You
not
weren't
alive.
there.
I wasn't there. I mean,
Pearl Harbor.
okay, I was not there when Pearl Harbor was bombed, right? But yet I say that I know that Pearl Harbor was bombed on December 7th of 1941, right? And I say that I know that, but I wasn't there. And pretty similar to this, we're going to get arguments, we're going to get accounts from both sides. We're going to get accounts from people who took part in the attack, and the people who were there, and the people who heard about it. But I'm going to have to, from that collection of all these different accounts and everyone's different opinions on stuff, we create a truth, and that's how I say I know it. So similarly, how do we create truth out of, it's kind of similar to this, where you're going to get bias, or accounts that have bias in them, and you have to create one truth from it. So how do we validate reason over emotion, or reason over faith, or reason over another way of knowing that I've forgotten because they're on the next slide? Language, yeah.
They are not on this slide.
Oh, okay, well,
So,
come up with a list of the different ways that you can know something personally. And this is kind of an individual thing, but if you want to
Yeah.
collaborate, that's cool too.
So just like come up with like 3 to 5 ways that are how you know something.
Ways that you can acquire knowledge. Okay. I'll tell you that emotion, reason, and faith are 3 of them.
So come up with 2 more.
Does anyone have an idea?
Experience?
Experience? Okay.
Yes.
That's good.
Does anyone have another idea?
Learning.
What was that?
Learning.
Learning?
It's being taught.
Is learning an experience?
Now here's the interesting debate that comes up at the beginning of like the fundamental of TOK. We have, you learn stuff and you experience stuff, right? There are things that I can't experience that I can learn, right? So history is an excellent example of that, where I'm going to learn secondhand everything that happened, but I'm going to say that I know it happened, even though I didn't experience it. Is that just as valid? Is that just as valid as like...
Actually like going through the emotions of experience.
Or if, okay, this is only example. If I'm a female doctor, and I they just talked about this in their TOK class. So if I'm a female doctor, am I gonna have more knowledge about being able to talk to you about like what it's like to birth a child than a male doctor? Am I gonna have, because let's say I've birthed a child, I have knowledge by experience with that rather than just knowledge by acquaintance. Yeah, knowing that. I know how it happens, I know what happens, I know what it feels like, rather than just knowing that. So here are the different ways we can know.
Are there any ones that are like surprising to you? Any ones that you have questions about? Cool, I'm gonna talk about that. My favorite way of knowing is language, actually, because I think it's really interesting. Because like what you're expressing, like you're expressing literal information, and there are flaws with that, like all of them. But also, like, it's really interesting because it's also how you're expressing it. So the tone you use, the accent you use, like how someone says something tells you just as much about a person as what they're saying. So if they have a southern accent, like you can kind of like identify some biases they might already have, and that goes into what they're saying and what kind of information and what kind of person they are. And then you can, in your head, like validate what they're saying to you. And so I always had questions on language as a way of knowing it, so I always like to talk about it.
Another one that I think is pretty cool that I at first was like, why is this a way of knowing, is imagination. You know, because how do you know something if you've imagined it? Because in my, before taking TOK, it was kind of like you either know stuff because there are facts there and you've seen it, or it's not true and you don't know it. But if I imagine something, we like looked into it and it is a way of knowing. That's how a lot of things kind of come to be. A lot of scientific discoveries come out of imagination, right? Or we talked about a planet that scientists say they know is there. They've never seen it. We can't get a picture of it. It's too far away and it's in orbit. But they have tracked with math and like physics with the math. They know that something is there, and they have determined that it is a planet. And they know the size of it, they know exactly where it is, but they've never seen it.
What's the difference between intuition and reason?
Intuition is just kind of like, have you ever heard the phrase, this is the only phrase I can think of that's associated with this, like feminine intuition? Like, have you ever heard that? Or like,
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of like that. It's like just like knowing something. Reason is using past information to synthesize a conclusion. And intuition is just kind of like, I feel this way, and so.
It's like that gut
It is.
feeling.
Yeah.
This is right or wrong.
Like a gut feeling.
The biggest difference between them is that a lot of times intuition is something that you just know. It's just you know it. But reason, you have to use past knowledge or other knowledge to kind of synthesize. Oh, like, here's what I know. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We already talked about that. Okay, so looking into what the class actually is, right? What is theory of knowledge? It's an attempt of looking at how and why we know, rather just accepting that we do know. Because up until this point, you've been taught and you've learned a bunch, you've memorized a lot of cool chem terms, and you've learned a lot about chem, right? For example, ionic. Okay, but rather than just accepting, oh, cool, these are facts and I know them,
It's
TOK,
challenging your knowledge.
well, and TOK lets you learn how you learned that. You know, how did I come to accept that that's the truth? How did we know that helium exists? How do we know? Chemistry provides actually an excellent example of, you know, we learn a lot of it, but truly we haven't seen it, but does that devalidate? So, you know, we haven't
seen the atom, but all of chemistry is based around the physics of like electron motions and like charges. And it works out, but we haven't seen it, so like, that's good, but why is there a reason to be concerned about that? And so that's something we talk about in TOK a lot.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, my turn. Give you a little background on what it is. Some person, they decided that spreading this massive bubonic plague that's new, so it's the neo-bubonic plague, was a great idea. They love it, but now everyone's dying and going crazy. Bad news. It's not so great. So everyone is, you're trying to, there are 8 people that have shown up at a shelter that you have, and you're trying to decide which people get to go in. There's only enough food in there for 4 days to last out the chemtrails that spread this plague, you know, because the chemtrails are everywhere. So you basically, you have to choose 4 that get to stay inside the shelter with you. And, you know, there are 8 people, so not everyone can stay.
4 people don't.
Yeah.
So just.
3, 2, 1.
Okay, so
Hey, bring it back. Your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
before we start, I would just like to hear, before any of the groups interact or anything, who did each group select? Who did you guys select?
Okay, we killed the blind student, the preacher, the musician, and the 72-year-old doctor.
Okay, someone on this side, you guys back there, what did your group select?
We chose to save the doctor.
Oh wait, no, those are the ones we killed.
Yeah.
Is what I said.
Oh,
Finish it.
okay. So we're saving the doctor, the engineer, the student, and for some reason the musician.
So it's interesting how this group said kill and this group said save, right? There were 2 different versions of the handout. On your guys' instance said, who do you want to kill, right? And on yours it said, who do you want to save, right? So raise your hand if your group had, who do you want to save? And raise your hand if it said, who do you want to kill? Do you think this changed your opinion on, you know,
Who you picked?
the language that you just saw, the difference between saying saved versus kill? Did that change the emotion behind? Because I heard people back there like, I think one of you guys said, "Oh, I don't want to kill anybody," and that's true. Hopefully none of us want to kill anybody.
Why are you looking at me?
No, but you know, so that changes the way that we're going to approach the question. You know, who do you want to save? Whereas in a positive light, you are the one who's coming to save all these people, rather than who are you going to kill? Where all of a sudden you probably start looking at it, or how did you guys come to make your guys' decisions? Maybe a group we haven't heard from. Yeah.
Depending on how useful they could be in the future.
And did you have kill or save?
We chose for to.
Okay. Interesting, right? Because he said he had to kill, and their primary decision-making method was through utilitarianism, or how useful.
How useful they'd be.
Yeah.
So do we want to
someone else?
get
How about that
anyone
group
use
in the back?
emotions?
Yeah.
How did you guys make your decision? Or like,
Well, we have to save,
yeah.
and we chose the doctor because even though he's like old, he can help save anyone if they get sick. The engineer because she could like make things happen. And the student, the musician are kind of just process of elimination.
But we chose the ones we chose mainly based on like who was youngest and who could give us the most for the future.
So really, I guess, kind of similar to that, but it had, yeah. So yeah.
Anyone else have a wildly different choice?
Did someone not save the doctor or the engineer?
Did anybody save or not kill the blind student?
Okay, wait. We saved or we killed the doctor.
So can you explain why you killed the doctor?
I didn't want to kill the doctor.
Yeah, why did you guys decide? I mean, there's not the wrong answer.
No, there's actually no wrong answer. He's an old dude. You thought he would die anyway, honestly? Might be right. So, but did anybody not kill, or did they save the blind student? No? Were there any arguments to save the blind student?
Yes.
There were?
Yeah. I didn't want to save the blind student, but they did.
What were the arguments? You felt bad? Okay,
So you were using emotion, right?
right? So her primary, initially she says, oh my gosh, I felt so bad. And then other groups were making decisions based based on, well, this is what was logical, here's what we think, right? So there are different ways that we go through and try to make decisions, right? That was a good use of water.
Yay. So this is really how we sort of go about doing this. This is sort of an ethical dilemma. There's a lot of these, but this is the one that we chose to do because we ended up doing this in our TOK class and it was a lot of fun.
It was a heated debate.
Yeah, it was very, very fun. So this sort of comes up again in sort of the making of self-driving cars. They have to make these split-second decisions about whether you turn right, kill the driver. Yeah, you know, that sort of thing.
Right, so if
Are you going to run over the pedestrians or turn into a
a
wall?
self-driving car comes up to a stop and it knows that it can't stop fast quickly enough to, and there are pedestrians crossing, it knows that it has 2 passengers, and it knows that there are pedestrians in front of it, and it knows that it can't stop. So its options are either to turn directly into a building right next to it and kill the 2 people in the back of the car, or to drive straight into the pedestrians and kill the pedestrians.
Yeah, so
How many pedestrians are there?
the car can't know that. It
2,
doesn't have that information.
One of
to make
them
a
is
decision.
pregnant.
Well, no, the car doesn't know that.
But
Basically, the
that
point
is
is that when this split-second decisions come up, it has to make a decision, and you can't, and it has to find some way of reaching a conclusion without the whole set of information. And so what it does is it essentially treats all the people as just one unit, and it figures out which one is the most, it causes the least amount of loss, basically.
Well, and what's interesting is the car's not making that decision. The humans who program the car make the decision for it, right? And if it can't determine, you know, how many people it's going to kill, how do you make that decision as the programmer? How can you possibly choose whether to make the car turn or to run it into a bunch of pedestrians?
I would say that the people that were in the car chose to be in the car, and I don't know, maybe like based on leases or things like that.
Yeah.
So the people that, like the pedestrians, they are not really in the scenario of people that are a fault of the car.
Right.
So I would say maybe it would turn right.
That's a very valid argument. That was definitely one that came up in our class.
Yeah.
Damage to the car.
Yep, next one.
Yeah.
We're gonna move on.
Lots of money.
Lots of money. Yeah. Okay.
Hey!
If you guys okay, so clearly you guys have seen Vsauce before. He's a pretty awesome dude.
Yoni's called
Yeah.
And this appears green. Those of us with normal color vision can probably agree, but that doesn't change the fact that color is an illusion.
And what is the answer to what are the best 2 colors that look good together? In your opinion, what are the, like,
What are the prettiest complementary colors?
I think navy blue and baby yellow look really good together.
Yeah, yeah.
Red and white.
Red and white,
Yes.
Yellow and blue.
yellow and blue.
Gold and cobalt.
Those are good.
Be specific, but yeah.
I like them.
Black and gold.
Black and gold.
Black
Yes.
Go high.
Black and white. Orange and
White.
Orange and black.
No, those suck.
Seafoam green and magenta.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
No, that's a good one. Right, so we all disagree, but how do we know that we're not all talking about the exact same colors, but calling them different things because that's how we see them? That's so... Yeah. Every time I say that, I'm just like, ah.
You know how like when you hit like, you know how you can invert the colors on your phone or computer? Like, what if that was how other people saw the world? And this is how.
So like one person sees it normally on your phone, but then the other person sees it inverted, but you still agree upon that it's like that specific color.
That you call it inverted, right?
Yeah. Or that you call it normal, like
on your phone, they would see it how we would see
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
like
I'm really confused.
But we would never know. It's
One-
impossible to
One
know.
thing is that like how light a color would look to somebody would have to be the same.
Yeah.
Right.
Because if they see the sky and they see it as darker, they would obviously be able to know that like it's not, it's lighter.
Right. And so, you know, the distinguishing factors between like what shade it is, or stuff like that probably are pretty similar, but it doesn't change the fact that like what I call blue, Jake could call red normally.
But it would like still be like
But
proportional.
yeah, you
Yeah.
would still call it right, exactly. So does anyone Anyone want to take a shot at the question how confident we can be in our knowledge? After all of this, all of the stuff that you thought you knew color, you thought you knew that.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
that's just
Yeah.
Or like, what have you guys learned in chemistry that you are confident is absolutely true? Like, what have you learned this semester or last semester?
Can we be confident in anything?
Oh, were you confident in everything before this?
No.
Are you less confident now than you were before?
Yay! Okay, good. That's the goal. And then the goal is to then be able to explain why you're unconfident or hopefully build things that you are so confident in that you will not change your opinion and you are here to say why you think it's that. And then other people will disagree with you. So yeah, are there any, okay, that was a lot of information at you.
So like
What questions do you have?
well, the purpose of the class is just for us to like question our knowledge. How can we actually make sure that it's valid? How can you like say one thing is more valid than another? Like we each have our own opinions, but how can we in the end say like who's more truthful?
And also I think the most important thing about the class, well not the most important thing, but one thing that I personally know to be true is that there isn't homework for the class.
A lot of it.
Okay, well,
There is
there's like the occasional like
There
worksheet
is
you have to
homework.
fill out.
It's mostly just like reading, highlighting, coming in, having ideas to talk about. Because otherwise you're not going to have like a good discussion. So you want to be, it's very minimal homework. It's more just like a
Maybe 20 minutes
discussion-based
a night.
class.
It's not busy work.
Well, you write, you
Second
get to,
semester there
yeah.
is a final, and it's producing. This is like a full IB thing.
Yeah.
So part of IB's requirements for TOK is that you produce a paper and you produce a presentation. The paper.
The paper is like 12.
And it's really cool
16
because
hours.
you've been working up to this point, you have these class discussions, and you might leave one day kind of angry, you're like, I disagree with everything that was said, but then you can go write your paper about it.
Yeah.
And then it's cool, because I think we all wrote about things that we,
I wrote about the color thing in my paper.
Like
Yeah,
none of our papers were the same.
right, I wrote about
And yet we all
truth.
took the same class.
Yeah, I wrote about truth in history and how we determine, standards in music, or what constitutes beauty in art.
Oh, there's another final too, for second semester. It's not a final, it's really fun, I swear. We go to the,
It is
swear!
fun.
The
It is
Minnesota
actually really
Institute of Arts, you go there, you pick out an art piece, and instead of saying, the color blue represents like beauty, like you talk about like what it actually means, like in terms of like TOK. So the piece I did is called the Curator's Room, and so
You're gonna ruin it?
I'll ruin it. So basically, the story is the first curator of the Minneapolis Institute of Arts mysteriously vanished during the McCarthy era because he got into some trouble. We don't know what it means, and the whole story is fake. And it was made by this artist who was like, "This would be fun." And so, yeah. So the story's fake. There was no curator. The room isn't in the original building of the Institute of Arts, and the whole story doesn't make sense when you look at it. But it's really cool because a lot of people do believe in it being fake.
I saw it, I thought it was real.
Most people think it's real, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't think, well, this is a new wing in the MIA. Like all you're doing is looking at the piece of art, analyzing it, and saying like, oh, this is true. It looks authentic, and yet it's fake.
Yeah, and so I talked about what truth means in terms of sense perception. Just because we see something doesn't mean it's true. The answer is no. But what does that mean? If we believe something is true, how much more important is that than it's factually true based off of history? And so, yeah.
So you
That's
get
a
to go.
really fun day.
You get